Okay, so you've installed your DWA sample, which has got the pipeline controller worker, some sample templates, and a lakehouse, a data warehouse, and a SQL Server meta database to store all of your automation. Just looking now at tooling, what tools can you use to interact with, right? So there's four primary tools that we use. The first one I'm going to show you is Lakehouse Explorer. So if you click on the Lakehouse, this is important because your lakehouse comprises both your managed kind of tables in the tables. So this is generally your landing area for kind of managed kind of data, and your files section is your raw data. So you can see in the raw data we have a landing zone where there's some sample CSVs and Excel files, and I can view those. I can automatically load them to a table without having to write any code, which is pretty cool. It's just a wizard, but it's pretty basic. And I can create or open a notebook, right? So for basic interaction, we wouldn't terribly recommend doing a lot of design work on tables from this interface, but there's some stuff that you can do. We can right click on the table, go to the maintenance to run the optimize if you've had a lot of fragmentation, or vacuum if you've got a lot of old kind of data, because don't forget that kind of Delta has time travel, so it keeps all the old versions of the rows. So an anti-pattern is that truncate and load, which is very common on kind of staging. That can create very huge files because all of history is kept, right? So vacuuming your tables on a regular basis is probably a good idea. This button here can be important if you've written to a table and want it to be available via the SQL endpoint. The refresh will run the MD sync process to register any new table changes. Now there's a Lakehouse view and a SQL Analytics view there. The SQL Analytics view is going to let you write sort of T-SQL on top of the endpoint. So you can actually create views and stuff, but it's fairly basic. For example, it doesn't currently let you alter views and stuff. A cute feature is the shared queries. So you could create like a deployment script where kind of multiple authors can get access to the same kind of script file. Okay, and obviously it's got a sort of Copilot integration. So that's for the Lakehouse. Now the next tool I'm going to show you is the Data Warehouse Explorer. So that's also one of the web GUIs, right? Just bring this up, power.com, back to my demo, and click on my data warehouse, right? Obviously, similar to Lakehouse Explorer, but it's just a SQL endpoint, right? So here you can interact with the tables. There is a SQL editor, which does have IntelliSense, as you see. Top 10 star from, let's go aw.dim account for my chart of accounts. Control instance run, and there is Copilot integration. Again, it supports shared queries, so you can write scripts, right? Now, we do find it a lot more limiting than the rich tools in Windows. So we're going to show you some of the rich tools in Windows, right? So the first tool that I'm going to show you is Storage Explorer. Once you download it, Azure kind of Storage Explorer, I'm sure that kind of most people have. You can authenticate by adding your Active Directory account. So I don't know if I've authenticated. Yeah, I've authenticated student one. And then when you do that, you can link in I'll just go back to this, an ADSL Gen 2 directory container. Give it the sign in as your account so it gets the right context. And then it asks you for what URL. And this is a trick. You can put in the URL for your one lake area under your lake house, right? Just to show you that, if I go back to the Lake House Explorer, back to my Lake House Explorer. If I have a file, I can see the path of the file. So let's just go to file, go to properties. See this kind of URL here, onelake.dfs.fabric.microsoft.com. That's basically the endpoint, right? Now just paste that in there. Now by default, some of the tools put the GUID and some of them put the workspace name, right? Azure Storage Explorer is actually compatible with both, right? So I would strongly recommend using the name of the workspace as opposed to the, so let's just put the name of the workspace like that, right? As opposed to the GUID, right? Because it's quite hard to see. So it's that, and then give it a friendly name. Then when you do that, connect, you're now going to have access to Storage Explorer to things, right? So here's my workspace. If I want to go into the unmanaged files section here, so I just get rid of the account management section. I could go into the landing zone, go in there, and I can see there. Now, notice I can preview files. So there's a nice little preview built into the newer version of that. And if I did have any, so I'm going to back up anything like a Parquet file, for example. Here's a Parquet file. It'll preview Parquet files as well, right? So it's quite a nice little tool, and we recommend. Now, an honorable mention goes to, there's a tool that you can download called OneLake Explorer. Just show you this. OneLake Explorer just brings it up screen, integrates your OneLake that you have authenticated into, and will show all of your workspaces. And when you click on those again, it'll show you all the artifacts in there. And if you go to the Lakehouse, what I call it, Fabric LH in this one, I can go to the unmanaged files. Now, we don't particularly like this as much as Storage Explorer because it's kind of asynchronous. It kind of, when a file appears, it doesn't necessarily appear here, and when it appears, and when you drag and drop, it doesn't necessarily get uploaded. That happens in the background, right? Whereas the Azure Storage Explorer is kind of synchronous. So what you're seeing is live. So we find that if you're doing a lot of work, Storage Explorer is probably, you start to find that a better tool. Okay. Now, the last tool that we're going to look at is SQL Management Studio. As I said, the web editor is a little bit limiting for the full development experience, and we wouldn't recommend for large projects because it doesn't really have all the features of Management Studio, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to go to your workspace and get your connection string to link in SQL Management Studio. I'm going to start off with my data warehouse. And if I click on the data warehouse, click on SQL endpoint, I can get the server connection string, right? Now, I wouldn't generally recommend connecting directly to that. I mean, you can, right? The problem, you've got to use the Entra 2-in-1, and you might have to use the Entra with MFA in most modern systems, right? Just click connect. It's going to authenticate me, and then it's going to connect me, right? Now, I wouldn't particularly recommend this because what you find is you just bang in the connection name. The name of the service is very nasty GUID, where it's got kind of the tenant name and then kind of the artifact ID of the lakehouse, and differentiate between dev and prod can be quite tricky, and you don't be accidentally dropping production when you think it's development, say, for example. So we prefer to use the registered server feature. If you go view registered servers, and in there you can create a, so for example, I'll create a server group. Let's do one. And in my server group, I can create some server registrations, put the same information in there, right? But this time, I can give it a friendly name. So I can give it the name of my workspace. Notice that I'm not connecting to the database or the lakehouse. I could, if I wanted to, specify database here. I'm actually connecting to them both. So let's save that. Save that. Now, when I run Object Explorer, you can see that I get the nice user-friendly name of the workspace, and I can see all of the SQL endpoints in there, right? Now, to get a connection to the SQL database can be a little bit confusing because what you see in your SQL endpoint connected to the workspace is not the SQL database. It's a replicated Delta version of that that's used for analytic purposes. So it's not kind of writable, right? So if you want to edit the metadatabase, you actually need a different connection string. So let's go to that now. If I go back to my workspace, click on my meta, I can get the connection strings from this little cogs button here, right? Just wait for it to come up, cogs, connection string. Now, it's a little bit more complicated connecting to the database, to the SQL database, because you probably want to connect to the database itself directly as well as a server. So you need two components, both the name of the endpoint, right? So I'm just going to get a new server registration, put the name of the endpoint, put it in there. Going to give it a name. A user-friendly name, right? But as well as the basic information, I'm going to put the name of the database in there as well, right? So I'm going to go back there. Now, currently, with the SQL database, mainly because it's in private preview, they have this nasty GUID attached to it to make it a unique name, because obviously multiple customers, they try to give them a unique database name internally. But we're discussing with kind of Microsoft, perhaps they can just externally just kind of show it as the actual name of the database that was created. You see, now once I've done that, I can run and bring up the Object Explorer. I might have to log in, obviously, to authenticate. There you go, cool. I've now got my SQL database. Now notice this is the full programmability surface. So if I've got the relevant permissions, I can add a database diagram, but I can view the tables. I'm now in the familiar territory of SQL Management Studio, but the full version of SQL. So I'll even have access to edit rows, design tables, primary keys and constraints can be enforced, right? So there's a lot of features that the SQL database has that the data warehouse or the lakehouse is not going to be. One thing to be aware of the SQL database is when you make a change here, it replicates it to the analytic endpoint here, but it doesn't do that in like instantly. It's sort of asynchronously, right? So if you do add a new piece of metadata and you query it in the analytics endpoint, it's not available instantly, right? Okay. One other thing I was going to show you is that when you do have a registered server, if I just go back to the registered servers, one cool thing that you can do is you can assign a color. See here, I can say that when I connect to my metadata base, I'm going to use a custom color of blue. Obviously, you could use like red for production and stuff like that, right? So what will happen now is when I connect to that, so when I write a query and stuff, I now get color code at the bottom to help me differentiate between different environments, right? So probably recommend those features. Okay, that's a very quick look at how to get started with the 4 common tools that we'd use for working with the data warehouses in Fabric.